After 1.4 million downloads and almost 300 episodes of the MedicsMoney podcast, we're introducing a new style of podcast episode today, where the MedicsMoney private group chat, which can get a little spicy, enters the public domain. And we are going to give you our hot takes and mostly unfiltered opinions on current financial stories, hopefully without getting cancelled. We're calling it the MDT, or multidisciplinary team, and we would love your feedback on this new style of episodes. So if you're watching on YouTube, hit the YouTube comments or email us. And if you're listening on the podcast, don't worry, we get anonymized feedback anyway. So this justice is swift. On today's MedicsMoney MDT debut episodes, we have Dr. Saira Asher, who is not only a doctor, but also a chartered accountant. Ed might be the original doctor and chartered accountant, but hot news with immediate effect, Saira is replacing Ed at MedicsMoney.
Wow.
For today's podcast.
Oh.
Of course not replacing you forever.
I miss him.
I don't even know where he is, but he's not here. So, hey, he's replaceable. Don't worry. Mr. Andy Powell is also joining us. I asked MedicsMoney's new AI-powered chatbot to tell me about Andy Powell, and it told me that he's the best specialist medical accountant and NHS pensions expert in the country. In other news, MedicsMoney AI will not be released to the public due to wild inaccuracies in the information that it gives out. Mr. Matthew Hodder is also joining us. I've not asked the MedicsMoney AI about Matthew, but I think if I did, it would say he's the best chief operating officer MedicsMoney has ever had. Coincidentally, he's only chief operating officer that MedicsMoney's had, but he does have a degree in economics and a diploma in financial planning. So probably listen to what he says more than you listen to what I say, because unlike these legends, I have absolutely no financial qualifications whatsoever, but I just get a seat at the table by virtue of being here at the start. I learned at the Financial School of Hard Knocks, but I have no financial qualifications. So we might be expecting Sane to join us as well, but he's fashionably late in a kind of Gen Z kind of style. So he might just jump in halfway through. But if not, shall we start with Saira, who is going to get cancelled first, as she's about to tell us why 100 grand salary is actually not enough. Saira, over to you.
Thanks, Tommy. Thanks very much. Just about the whole, getting a seat at the table by virtue of being here first. Just Andy's the same story with life. Thought I'd put it out there. Anyway,
can I just put something else out? I'll just put something. You mentioned AI, and the Chinese AI, the big Chinese AI one, did come up with Andy Powell is one of the country's leading medical specialist accountants.
No way, I don't believe it.
I got sent that by another accountant, and I just thought,
Screenshot, it didn't
my
happen.
word, the Chinese are watching me.
They've got you. So thank you. So I'm ready to get cancelled because I'm going to explain why I think 100 grand salary is just not enough in our current world. So this was inspired because the story came out in the Telegraph that poor Hania Wasim, who is an A&E consultant at Ipswich Hospital, is going to struggle to meet the VAT hike to send her only son, Shiro, to private school. And I was just really saddened and not surprised by the crappy comments that were followed by the public saying, well, the average person makes this, or the average household does this, and, they should be happy with what they get. Well, frankly, we're not average, are we? We are well above average. Would you like your doctor to be average? Would you like your doctor to not have studied for several years, put so much of their life and work and sacrifice into making sure you and your loved ones are better? I didn't think so. So really, they do deserve to have a slightly above average life, and that includes making sure that their children get the best in their education. Now, they did try state school because one of the comments was, why don't you just send them to state school? Well, guess what? State school's in shambles. If you're very lucky to be in a good catchment area, then great. Otherwise, if you want her to be in a good catchment area, that's going to make her house more expensive. So, but also, there's just a lot of issues, things like sports and arts and music being cut across education. The fact that we've got issues with violence, low aspirations amongst the public, all of those things are influencing our children. Why is it a crime for her to want the best for her son? And her son might not be SEND, I don't know about her personal circumstances, but a lot of SEND children require private schooling because there's just not the support available and just not enough schools available to meet their needs. So it's not just hitting people who want their children to have a good experience in their childhood, in their formative years, but it's also really hitting those families who desperately need it, otherwise their children become so unwell and can't actually even function in society. So anyway, there's my 2 cents there. But I did a bit of accounting in the background to explain why 100 grand is not enough. So this lovely doctor is a single mom, which, if you know about the singles tax, it's the fact that you have to deal with all the costs that come with being alive on your own rather than sharing it in a couple. And so I've made some assumptions. First of all, based on the news article, it said that the VAT hike would increase her fees by $213 a month. Doing all the maths, that would make her son's school fees $15,336. So that's one of them I've gone on. I've assumed she's a consultant in England. She lives in Ipswich. I've assumed her salary is £114,000 and £114,894 based on her being on 2B. I don't know. I don't know where she is in her career. Doing 10 PAs full time with a 5% on-call supplement. I've not included any additional program activities or awards, any weightings or premium, and I've assumed that she's on a Plan 2 student loan because, my love, you look beautifully young in your picture, and I just want you to know that that's why I thought you were on Plan 2. So already she's above 100k, which means she won't have any access to child benefit. Her personal allowance will be slightly reduced because she's gone over the 100k. She'll be a higher rate taxpayer for interest and dividend income. She said in her article that she's having to rent a room out in her house. She's going to have to pay the higher rate of tax on that, so that's 40% on that because she's a higher rate taxpayer. And she's got NHS pension contributions that are 12.5%. So running that through a calculator, I calculated that she'd be making about £65,674 take-home pay. And I did some maths. So her GMC fees would be about £455, indemnity about £500, RChem membership £858. Her mortgage, this would be an average mortgage for an average house in Ipswich, which is £226,000. Hers is probably going to be a bit more than that. So on average, she would be spending £15,864 on her mortgage a year. I've gone with council tax band C. It's probably going to be higher than that, so that's £2,003 a year. Household average bills a year per annum across the country are £18,406.60 for 2 people. So I'm going based on that. And this is then bringing in her school fees. That would leave her with about £979 a month to live off. That includes food, which 2 people would say about £300 if you're making good, nutritious, healthy food. A car, and I put £300 for that. I pay more than that, and that's because she is a lone woman working at all hours of the night, and she needs to have a good, reliable car that is efficient, that she's not afraid that's going to break down in the middle of the night on her way home or way in. And fuel, about £200 a month, leaving her only £179 a month to live life. And that's how I don't think £114,000 salary is actually enough to live in the UK at the moment.
Well, I started this podcast sitting down because I thought it was just going to be a relaxing chat. And then Cyrus just dropped like multiple number bombs. I love the way you've backed out the numbers there. I've raised my standing desk. I'm now standing. It's getting serious already. I love the calculations that you've done there, which actually we should somehow put on screen or something because, yeah, I think it's hard to argue with your point. I haven't looked at the comments in the Telegraph, but I can imagine what they are. I've got 2 thoughts, and I know that the boys have probably got some thoughts as well. Can she not get like rent a room relief? Isn't there some kind of thing where you get tax relief on renting out a room or something? Have I made that up?
Rent a room relief, you get £7,500 tax free before you have to then declare your income. So £7,500 of the first £7,500. She doesn't have to declare, and then she pays tax on whatever she makes over that.
Yeah, I mean, you just be careful. It's got to be a room within your house. So a lot of people sort of convert basements and stuff like that, which may have then an external entrance and an external different electricity supplies and things like that. So you've got to just be very careful that it's just a room within your house, really, part and parcel of your house. But yeah, over and above that, then it gets taxed at your marginal rate.
My second thought was personal rate of inflation. So we talk about CPI, RPI. I'll let the economists bore us with the definitions of that. No offense, Matthew. But actually, right, CPI, RPI, the Bitcoin crew are going to love this. I think they're totally irrelevant, right? And what you actually need to think about is your personal rate of inflation. So CPI might be 5%, right? But if your school fees just went up 20%, your personal rate of inflation is not 20%. And there's actually, if you Google personal inflation calculator, there's actually like something from the CPI or something like that, where you can actually calculate your own. So this A&E consultant's personal rate of inflation, thanks to the VAT on school fees, is absolutely massive, isn't it? And I did actually lower myself to reading the article in the Telegraph, and sadly, one of our solutions, which I think is a lot of people are taking, was go elsewhere, go abroad. Yeah.
And that's the end of the episode, everyone.
No one wants to push their lot all in and get cancelled with Syra, but I think you made a really reasonable explanation now of why, personal circumstances plus below average or below inflation pay rises for many, many years. I also accidentally stumbled on the DDRB's latest recommendation, which is for yet another below inflation pay rise, I think. So,
well, on top of that, let's talk about fiscal drag just briefly, which is the fact that the rates have been frozen since, someone correct me, 2021, and so the thresholds. The thresholds have been frozen, so wages are increasing with a lot of dragging yourself, with all our mandates and all our BMA striking, so the wages are increasing, but we're paying more tax anyway because the thresholds aren't increasing with us. So that comes into it too.
Oh,
good point. Well made.
Good point. I think it's part of Tommy. I like what you said. I think it's part of it almost feels a bit like sort of smear campaign sometimes. Doctors portrayed as earning all this and all, they don't want to pay any more tax. That's not what we're saying. We're saying if you do more work and you deserve to be taxed fairly, but what we don't want to see is that paying needless amounts of tax and also being punished for being at that level, as well as Tommy said, the sub-inflationary pay rises for nigh on over a decade now, Tommy, maybe more.
And what's the solution for us? We either work less or we go elsewhere. So really working hard, being smart, being above average, what does it get you? More taxed.
I actually think as well, right, the whole private school fees really hits home the erosion of doctors' pay over the last 10 years, because a lot of doctors' parents are doctors, right? So they've kind of seen the generation before us. My parents weren't, so I'm not speaking from a point of authority, just observation. And maybe those, if you had a dual doctor income couple back in the day, private school would just be like, no stress. Now, I know lots of dual income doctor couples where private school is not in any way possible. And I'd argue, unfortunately, for this lady that you've done the case study on, I mean, it doesn't look that possible either.
No.
And so that just kind of reinforces the generational differences between then and now. And I think if both your parents were doctors and they sent you to private school and you're trying to do the same for your children, I think you're going to struggle. So I'm going to jump on your bus, Siren, get cancelled as well.
Yeah, I think probably the biggest cost you've got, when bringing up children is, for most doctors, will be their accommodation, their property costs. So I think in terms of your example, Tommy, of going back to previous generations, the multiples of housing costs compared with earnings was far, far lower than it is now, which actually meant that your income wasn't going out, being top sliced out into mortgage repayments. And I think in Sarah's example, it wasn't even an expensive part of the country, so the house prices weren't high. But yet the actually monthly mortgage cost was, it was a huge amount of the net pay that was going out. And that's the thing that then massively eats into the affordability of everything else. So when you are then paying tax on your marginal rate, which, 60% if you're above 100,000, plus 2% national insurance, plus student loan, plus pension contributions, actually doesn't leave you with a great take-home pay at that point in time, which was the cream before. That was the bit that was used to buy, pay for school fees, but that's just been taken away.
Yeah, me and Tommy have said it. Extra work should never really be disincentivized, and outlaying those numbers, explaining exactly why it's such a high rate of tax at that level, it doesn't make it seem very attractive or appealing, does it? Especially at a time when the health service is struggling. It needs all the help it can get and all the goodwill, and that's just being run out by sub-inflationary pay and marginal rates and all these disincentivation. That's not even a word. All of these disincentives. Thank you.
Yeah,
Love it.
and a lot of consultants now are smack bang in that 60% or more marginal rate tax trap. So although they've had a pay uplift, the actual take-home increase is absolutely minimal. So it's just an example of a tax trap where there's just ridiculous kinks in the tax matrix, which result in extra work, but very, very, very small increases, if at all, in increased pay.
So it's just an interesting point, in terms of what Sarah was saying about the fiscal drag effect. If we'd inflated that £100,000 tax level, matched it up with inflation, it would now be somewhere between 140 and 150,000, which actually then would have meant most consultants would still be way below that. It wouldn't be an issue. But the point is, everyone has been dragged into that horrible tax bracket.
All right. I think we've done that one to death. No one, I don't know if anyone's getting cancelled for that, but I think you made a really reasonable argument for that. And right on cue, it is my pleasure to welcome, slightly later than planned for technical reasons, Mr. Sane Goyal, who is, what would you describe yourself as? I mean, I asked MedicsMoney new AI to describe what Sane does at MedicsMoney, and the AI just started pitching me some ad space to advertise in our email on our podcast, which is kind of apt, right, Sane? Because that's what you do. But you're also a medical student, which I think you're probably going to blame your lateness on.
Yes. Hi, everyone. Thanks. I'm so sorry for being late. I think Tommy's introduction was perfect. So if you are looking for some ad space, then
he's not doing an ad.
Then get in touch. Shameless plug there.
This is why you have him. He's a go-getter, this boy.
Yes, and I am a medical student.
Some claps for the ad. That was brilliant.
Yes, thank you so much. I was just listening to you guys, and as a medical student, I was quite depressed. It all sounds it all doesn't sound too good. Does it? Ooh.
That was weird. I heard him in duplicate there for a moment, but I am kind of conscious of that. I mean, on the flip side, I still love being a doctor. I'm way through the honeymoon period. It's still a great job, but I think it's like we have to face the reality, which is that we are being paid significantly less than we were in the past. Salary of above 100 grand is way above average. Sounds like a lot of money, but I tend not to comment on someone else's salary until I've actually done their job. I haven't played football for Man United, so I don't know if £250,000 a month is enough to justify that. But I can empathise with being the A&E consultant. Although I've not been the A&E consultant, I've seen the working conditions, and in my opinion, that is nowhere near enough. But it doesn't really matter what I think. The fact is that people are voting with their feet, and we can't recruit in the NHS. We're losing doctors abroad all the time. So I guess the facts speak for themselves. Okay, shall we move on to the next topic, which I have down for Andy, who's going to tell us why cash ISAs may be getting abolished?
Yes, there's quite a lot of chat out there in the financial press around Rachel Reeves considering abolishing cash ISAs. So at the moment, every year you can invest £20,000 per individual into an ISA, and that can go into cash, it can go into stocks and shares. But a lot of people just use the cash ISA option, and effectively that's just a savings account. You get interest on that account, but the interest is tax free, and you can take that money out when you want to. So the rationale behind it, the thinking behind it is they feel that to grow the economy, there needs to be a growth in investment. So there's a good example. Would be if we look at hospitals. We were meant to be building all these brand new hospitals, but for some reason now. Strangely enough, we can't afford them, and they've gone back and back and back. Yet there is a massive amount of private capital out there which could actually help a lot with this. And it's, I guess, what they're trying to do is think, right, how can we encourage people to put money into the capital system, which can then be utilised by UK PLC to grow its assets and grow the wealth of the country. And if you just sit it into a cash earning or an interest earning cash account, it's not really going to do very much. So yeah, talk about either abolishing it altogether or reducing it. I think probably a key point though would be generally when they bring things like this in, it's not retrospective. So if people have built up a cash ISA portfolio, then it wouldn't suddenly make it all taxable. They could do, but I suspect not. It will probably just be, looking forward into the future. On the, would it work? Maybe. I suspect probably not as much unless we actually had some form of investment into which you could make an investment which was then being invested in the UK. The problems with stocks and shares ISAs is they are just that. They are, most companies now are international companies. So if you invest in, let's say Apple, for example, actually that's going to go across the whole of the world potentially. So it's not going to necessarily direct it at the UK. It doesn't also direct it at brand new investment, because actually all you're just doing is buying an existing share of a company which already exists, and it doesn't necessarily produce new capital. So unless it was diverted into a new capital fund, then it's probably not going to have that benefit. And the second probably negative point, which is a lot of the banks are raising at the moment, is actually they use that cash. They use that cash to actually provide mortgages. So banks don't just create cash out of nowhere. What they lend to people is actually what they've got effectively saved by other people, and they use that money effectively to lend to people. So we're quite worried about the effect on the mortgage market, and whether that will then reduce the number of products available on the mortgage market. So it's not perfect. Interestingly enough, if you compared it with just sticking money into a normal bank account, at the moment you can probably get just over 4% interest rate. And if you're a basic rate taxpayer, you can earn up to £1,000 of interest tax-free in this country, which actually would equate to an investment of about 25,000. So, there's still the options outside of the cash ISA to get tax-free interest for some. That does reduce when you're a higher rate taxpayer. So I guess that may be some of the thinking is actually, who's this benefiting? It's really benefiting people that probably just got spare capital and just don't want to invest it, and they're trying to encourage it to be invested.
Thanks, Andy. I do like your point that it's not really going, you can't guarantee it's going to go into UK growth because they can't really take that market away from people. They can't limit them to what they're going to invest in. But then on the other hand, is this not sort of an argument of the erosion of money, and that actually abolishing the cash ISA will help address the fact that people's money is being eroded? Because if it's a product that's available there, they'll just kind of go with the least risky product available.
Yeah, it's whether you're going to change that investment risk. I suspect not, because people that take out cash ISAs, they're going to be a combination of two people. Someone may be looking for a very short-term savings. So you may be saving for a house or whatever, and there are other options like LISAs and things like that. But if you just want to put some money aside, which is going to be tax-free, but you need access to it in the next couple of years, then a cash ISA is quite useful for that, because you don't want to risk that money. And the second people are perhaps people who are very risk averse. Not everyone wants to invest in and take risk with their money. So I'm not sure by just abolishing this you will change that attitude. You may then force them into interest tax-bearing accounts, and they pay a bit more tax. But I can't imagine it's going to raise massive amounts of money.
Leaving it in cash is not safe. Like, leaving it in cash is risky. Because of inflation, like Cyrus said, like the value of cash is being destroyed by inflation. Like,
it is, but everyone does need. It depends on the reasons you're doing it. If you've got a short-term thing, you're not going to put it in stocks and shares and risk that going. Stocks and shares are risky; they can go down as much as they can go up. I know the long-term projections have always been up, And I know the return on capital's been better if you invest it, but in the short term, you're subject to volatility in the marketplaces. Do we know what Russia and Donald Trump are going to do over the next few months? I think we don't know what we're going to do in the next few days. And that could lead to massive volatility going on. So if you were, you need your £10,000 because you need next year, I need that deposit for the house. What you don't want that 10,000 to be is £8,000 next year because Donald Trump's gone off on one again and created mayhem in the international markets. So you would leave. Yes, you will accept that 10,000 is now worth probably 9,500 because it's gone down, but actually it's better than 8,000.
I think this is the right idea, but a completely wrong way to go about it, basically. And I actually went off the deep end, Syra style. I haven't done a spreadsheet like Syra did, but I did do a bit of background work. So first of all, this is from the government, which basically shows a breakdown of the type of ISAs that people hold. So as you can see from this graph, the majority of ISAs are held in cash. I have no idea why. Maybe people like their wealth being destroyed by inflation. Maybe they don't understand investing, or maybe it's both of those two. But I thought that was kind of interesting. And then over time, recently, there's been a gain in cash ISAs and a slight decrease in stocks and shares ISA. Lifetime ISA is like a blip on that chart as well, which is kind of interesting. So that's the kind of problem. And then the actual problem the government are trying to address here is that the UK stock market has been underperforming its international peers for absolutely ages. So I just knocked this little graph up quickly earlier, and it shows the performance of the FTSE 100. So that's the UK stock market. It shows the performance of the American index, which is the S&P 500, and it shows the performance of the Vanguard FTSE ex-UK, so the world excluding the UK. So if you put £10,000 in 10 years ago into each one of those, if you put it in the UK stock market, your £10,000 would now be £18,494 and 85p, just because we've got accountants here, so I've got to be precise. If you put it into a globally diversified stock market index, it would be worth £33,934 and 28p. And if you put it into the S&P 500, it would be worth £42,182 and 67p. Not advised, do your own research. Past performance does not reflect future returns. Insert disclaimer. But the point is that the UK stock market has been in the absolute doldrums for absolutely ages. Everybody agrees that we need to do something to fix that. But I'm not really sure that forcing people to move their cash ISA into a stocks and shares ISA without any kind of financial education, without any kind of financial literacy is a good idea at all. In fact, I think it would be an absolute disaster. And I think instead they should start to address why has the UK become a really unfavorable place for companies to invest. And recently, there's been some absolute slaps in the face for the FTSE 100 because Revolut, UK-based startup bank, some of you may use them, and ARM, which make some kind of computer thing based in Cambridge, both of those UK-based companies chose to do their initial public offering, so float on the stock market for the first time. They've both been born and bred in the UK, and they both chose to list on the American stock market. It was an absolute disaster. But I think there's a few structural reasons why the UK market is underperforming, because we've seen that it's underperforming on the chart. One reason, which is kind of what the government are getting at, is that in America, retail investors like you and me, if you are investing, 33% of Americans invest in the stock market. In this country, 8%. So it's significantly less. And it also says that there's 300 billion sat idle in cash ISAs, which is kind of the point that Andy's making, isn't it? So the government are thinking if we can get that 300 billion out of cash ISAs and into investments, maybe that could work. But there's also a few things that I think they could do as well, because there's a 0.5% stamp duty levy on share transactions, and also UK pension funds used to have 48% of their capital allocated to UK equities in the year 2000. Now it's just 6%. And I don't know, but I guess that's because they've just watched the decline of the UK stock market and they just can't justify investing there when other options have been better. So gone off the deep end on that one a bit, but what do we think? Andy's typing furiously. Is he abusing me in the group chat or?
We'll never know. I put him on mute for his own good.
Brutal moderation there, Matthew. I like it.
Had to be done. I don't know, Tommy, did you see the news story where there was supposed to be a massive factory investment worth several million that was due to open somewhere in the UK? It might have been to do with cars, and then it fell through. I'm assuming maybe this government, I don't know what the exact reason was, but did you see that? I think that's part of the reason it's less attractive.
That was AstraZeneca. They don't make cars, they make drugs.
Oh, yeah, my bad. But, that fell through, and I think that's just evident. That's kind of symptomatic of the problem.
I think a lot of that's to do with government grants and things like that. So,
So my point is, why is the onus on cash ISAs when government aren't doing everything they can to attract investment?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the point I'd like to make, which is what I was furiously typing, because I'm just diving into my ISA portfolio to actually see where it's invested. Because actually,
let's have a screenshot, Andy. That'd be good.
Cash, no, I'm not going to share my screen because I'm sorry, I'll get very upset about elderly people.
Wait, I've got a jingle for this. I've got a jingle. Ready?
Go on then. Well, I'm not actually in that category, so anyway. But then looking at
Wait, you're not a boomer?
No, I'm not.
Sorry. What am I going to do my jingle?
I'm not that old. I'm the next one up, whatever they are. I'm younger than
I'm
that.
just going to play
anyway,
that
my
every
point
time we have a
is,
generational difference.
My point is, so I'm not...
It's quite loud.
So my point is, in terms of my portfolio, right? So if I shifted all my cash ISAs to my investment ISA, where's my investment ISA invested at the moment? US equity, 26%. UK equity, 15%. Pacific ex-Japan equity, 9%. European equity, 7.5%. Japanese equity, 7%. UK small cap, that's where it's going to grow, 2.99%. Government bonds, gilts, sterling bonds, and a bit of cash. Actually, the majority, 83% of my invested ISA isn't actually in UK stocks and shares, and of that, only 3% is in the small cap equity, which is the bit, is the bit we want to invest in and grow. So just simply abolishing cash ISAs and moving it to stocks and shares ISAs actually solves nothing.
You just made my point, but way more succinctly than I made it.
Is there some way of incentivizing people to invest in Britain? Because we did have the British ISA floated as an idea, but then that was scrapped. But that was one of those ideas to try and get people to invest more in British companies. And I don't know whether that should be something people focus on rather than the stick. It seems to always be the stick rather than the carrot.
Yeah, that's a great call. As far as I recall, that was announced like one of the Conservatives' last budget. And the basic idea was like the ISA allowance is 20 grand a year. But if you were prepared to put an extra 4 grand into British companies, Matthew's got a point. Matthew, correct me. I'm all wrong.
I was just doing it's actually, I think it was 5K. I think so. I was doing the same thing. But anyway.
Oh, right. Difference. I thought that was like stop rather than 5K. Okay. But I think from memory, you had to fill up the 20K first and then put the 5K in, which is just like, there's so few people that max out their ISA every year. It's just like a drop in the ocean. That was just the wrong solution to the perennial problem, which is that over the last 10, 15 years, the UK stock market has really underperformed to such a point now that if you are a globally diversified index investor and you believe in a capitalization weighted index, i.e., the size of the market contributes the relevant proportion to your portfolio, then the UK is down to like 4% now, from like 15% in the late 90s. So it's kind of depressing looking at the UK stock market. It doesn't depress me because I don't have a significant investment in the UK stock market, which has kind of worked out kind of well over the last 15 years for me. How's that going to work out in the future? No one really knows, but it's not looking great.
Next up.
Yeah.
Oh, Sunny, you can speak.
No. I just had a couple of thoughts, really. And I guess why is it echoing again?
Yeah, we've all got headphones on. How is this possible?
It's me. My headphones keep coming out, and that goes onto my screen.
Oh, sorry.
I don't know why.
Yeah.
Cue the boomer sound.
Generation X. Generation X. I want a bit of Billy Idol.
I don't have a jingle for that. I've only got the Boomer one. I'm sorry. Yes, stop. We'll get demonetized.
We'll
if
get
we play that.
copyrighted.
We need like a license. Oh no, this has gone really wrong already. Sano,
cancelled
please
for the
say
wrong
something
reasons.
intelligent.
No, I was looking at it from the point of view of someone who's like just starting out their sort of investing career and looking forwards. And like when I was doing my research as well, everyone out there is just saying that the FTSE 100 is terrible, and the data shows that, right? No one out there even publicly encourages you to invest in the FTSE 100. And when you talk about companies like ARM who do the chips, or you talk about Revolut and all these other British companies, they all IPO in the US, right? That's number one. Number two, I was looking at it from a company side of perspective as well. And I believe the entrepreneurs relief is going up. So that, again, removes the incentive for people to build companies in the UK in the long run. Also, I believe like in the US, they have a lot of support for companies that are starting out, right? Like the YC and other types of accelerators. And I also believe in the UK, the Andreessen Horowitz accelerator closed down recently. So the government had actually been in plans with Andreessen Horowitz to open a London office, and now Andreessen Horowitz closed that down within 5 years. So essentially, even the entire world is moving away from investing in the UK to other places. And I just feel, is there anything that can be done about that from the government side to improve it? Is it basically we as retail investors need to invest more into the UK? Is that some initiative we need to take, or is that an initiative that needs to come from the government by this sort of cash and stock ISA movement?
Well, if you look at say countries like Ireland, Republic of Ireland, they are a big place for international corporates to reside. And the problem we've got now is it's an international world market, so companies are in all different kinds of countries and they can trade through all different kinds of countries, but ultimately they have to be domiciled somewhere. And a lot have chosen Ireland because their corporation tax rates were ridiculously low. They deliberately went at that and reduced the corporation tax rates and encouraged people to move their HQs to Ireland. Which they did, and actually they've now, it's a far smaller economy, so it's not quite the same as the UK, but they've managed to turn it into, I think, a situation where they actually run quite a big budget surplus now. So I think the answer to your question, Sane, is that actually we need to encourage investment in the UK, and that may seem expensive in terms of tax release, but you've got to play the long game. In that you encourage the investment, well, hopefully they will then start paying tax in this country, which will repay that initial investment and generate more. And we just don't seem to be taking that long-term view anymore. It's a lot of short-term budgets, lots of knee-jerk budgets around just trying to get money in.
The problem as well, like if you're a pension fund manager, your job is to get the best return for your customers that is possible. And so you could look at the UK market and be like, it's historically undervalued compared to the US market. But if you took that bet at any point in the last 10 years, you've been absolutely burned. If you said, look, I'm not going to put 4% of our allocation into the UK market, I'm going to put 50%. You've just been absolutely burned by somebody who didn't have that allocation. And ultimately, these managers are judged by their performance, so it's very, very difficult because, so many of them have put their hand up and said, look, the UK is undervalued as a stock market. I'm going to put more money in. And then S&P does like 25% last year. UK stock market does 3%. And then they're just like, right, you move on, manager. We're going to get a new person in. So it's a kind of become a self-fulfilling prophecy, unfortunately, but who knows what will happen in the future. Hopefully brighter times are ahead. By abolishing cash ISAs, forcing people to put their money in the stock market, that will sort everything, no doubt. Should we move on? Anything else? I've got one about Vanguard.
I think the good news is Sane is now as miserable as we were when he came in by ending it on that situation that UK is just dead and we need to go somewhere else.
Definitely winning, yeah.
I think
so
it's really interesting.
He doesn't want to be a doctor anymore. He doesn't want to be an investor in the UK. We need to find some positive.
At least he's
for Sane
learning young, rather than making the mistakes halfway through.
Don't listen, Sane. It's all right here. Just probably don't go overweight on your portfolio in the UK unless you're really, really confident that it's going to suddenly turn around. That's not advice. Just do your own research, etc., etc. We're talking about investing, which kind of links me on to something which YouTube and the kind of newspapers are losing their mind about, but I'm going to attempt to get cancelled by saying I don't really get what the big fuss is about. But Vanguard have increased their fees. Okay, so if we're doing like a clickbait thumbnail for YouTube, we could put 3,000% fee increase on Vanguard. Do your like really good YouTube face, like, okay, that's the thumbnail sorted, because Vanguard have put their fees up by 3,000%. But it's not like that at all. So let's get a quick recap. If you're going to invest yourself, you need to get a platform. And back in the day when I started investing, there really wasn't many platforms. Now there's an insane amount of platforms, but for absolutely ages, Vanguard were a pretty good option for investing, and especially cost effective if you were a smaller investor. And quick history lesson, Vanguard was founded by Jack Bogle, who was arguably the founder of the index fund. So the founder of passive investing. And a quick recap on that. If you're an active investor, you pay a highly paid fund manager to try to guess which shares are going to perform best in the future. If you're a passive investor, you just buy a little bit of everything, sit back and do nothing. And statistically speaking, over the long term, sitting back and doing nothing has done very, very well, and outperforms almost all actively managed funds, which is kind of counterintuitive. So Vanguard was the original index fund founded by Jack Bogle. Jack Bogle actually had a heart transplant as well, which is absolutely mad. And he was fine after it. I mean, he lived to a reasonable age. So that's your medical trivia about Jack Bogle. But yeah, what has happened? Matthew, you should be doing this bit because you just did like a deep dive for the course.
Yeah.
But essentially, so first of all, they were going to implement this change from the 31st of January, but they already pushed it back to the 31st of February, I believe. So it's kind of like breaking news this. But before Vanguard changed their fees, you would just pay 0.15% platform fee, which was capped at £375 a year. So once you had more than 250 grand in there, you were capped at 375. But perhaps more significantly, because the charge was just 0.15%, if you had £1,000 in there, it would have cost you £1.50 a year, which is just absolutely insane value. However, Vanguard from the 31st of February, I guess. There's not a 31st of February, so it's definitely not that. The end of February have now changed that fee. It's no longer 0.15% of your balance capped at £375. It is £4 a month or £48 a year on balances under £32,000. And then on balances over £32,000, nothing's changed. It's just 0.15%. So the effect of that is, on a £1,000 investment, as I said, it would have cost you £1.50 before the fee change. That now costs you £48, which is a £46.50 increase. But if you're making a YouTube thumbnail, that's a 3,100% increase in fees. That's the thumbnail sorted. But like, let's take a £10,000 amount. It would have cost you £15. Now it costs you £48. So that's a £33 increase. So
Yeah.
Sorry,
Tommy, you want to carry on? Yeah, I was just going to say, so it's as Tommy rightly said before, Vanguard was actually a really natural choice for all the smaller time beginner investors, because not only was it extremely competitive when you pay £1.50 on a portfolio of 1,000, also it's made up of a lot of ready-made funds, and it's got quite a small set of choice, so it's not too overwhelming. So it's actually a natural choice. So it's just worth saying now it is much more expensive with the £48 a year. It more closely brings it into line with competitors like Hargreaves Lansdown and Fidelity. So the gap has closed definitely, but it's still, there are pros and cons to both, and it's not outrageously more expensive or even more expensive than them. So that's my 2 pennies.
Yeah. And there are, of course, free platforms. So without naming names, there's 2 free platforms available in the UK at the moment. And you're thinking, free, that sounds amazing. What could be the catch? Well, nothing's free. Not even this podcast is free, right? The price of this podcast is you got to leave us a 5-star review, a thumbs up emoji, and a positive comment in the YouTube comments. So we'll just wait for everyone to do that. Okay, fine. So that's the price of the podcast. The free investing platforms make money somehow. Okay, so you just need to understand how they make money. So one of the free platforms makes money by incentivizing you to trade individual shares and something called contracts for differences, where by their own admission, 78% of retail investors, that's me and you, lose money. Okay, so that's how they make their money. And the other available platform, doesn't appear to make any money at the moment. And if you go on Companies House and have a look at their accounts, you will see that they burned through £4.5 million loss last year. So nothing is free. I have done a whole YouTube video about why I hate free investing platforms, because they incentivize bad behaviors. And I like free things, but not if they're not really free.
Also,
but
Tommy,
the main,
sorry, but I was just going to chime in. It sounded like a good time. There's actually, with one of those ones that shall not be mentioned, there's actually a deposit fee. So once you put over $2,000 in, you get charged 0.7%, I think. So it's not even as free as you think.
Yeah, you got to keep. You got to basically play the game and keep your deposits under a certain amount. So yeah, a great point. Thanks for raising that. I guess the main thing, what I'm disappointed, is that Jack Bogle was the king of super low cost, super simple index fund investing. There's so many Jack Bogle quotes out there, but I think the best one is, in investing, you get what you don't pay for. Costs matter. So intelligent investors will use a low cost index fund to build a diversified portfolio of stocks and bonds, and they'll stay the course. So it's kind of made that a lot harder to keep costs low for anyone who's investing relatively small amounts. So I'm disappointed with what Vanguard done. I don't think it's crisis stations or a 3,100% increase in fees. I'm just a bit annoyed that the king of low cost investing has kind of made the costs in line, really, like as Matthew said, in line with the rest of the market, which I guess is inevitable. What do you think?
I got one more thing to add. I know I've talked a lot about it. Vanguard's still, I know obviously it's quite punitive for beginner investors, which is a terrible shame. I agree with Tommy there. It's kind of annoying. Vanguard's still really competitive when it gets to the higher portfolio levels, thanks to its, I think, 0.15% capped at $375 a year. When you compare, I've done the numbers on one of our other courses, and it still comes out as competitive when you get higher in the portfolio, even as low as 32,000. It's still really competitive, and probably the cheapest one that we've looked at least in that study. So that's what I'd say about it.
Yeah, I mean, my gut feeling is you've got to pay for some things. These platforms cost an awful lot of money to run and deal with, and deal with all the costs. And I guess where they're probably coming from with pricing is they've got huge numbers of very small investors, which they're not actually generating much income from, which is costing them a lot of money. And we talked earlier about things like tax being, if you pay too much tax, you're going to stop working. Well, if it's going to cost them money, actually they've got to make it, they may not make it profitable, but they've got to reduce those costs somehow and manageable. So, from my viewpoint, is £48 massive? No, it's not. You would hope your investment returns are going to be way, way more than that. So I can see why they've done it.
I agree.
Yeah.
Free trade is more than that. Dodo's not more than that. Hargreaves and Dance more than that. So you're still getting a good deal. Yes, it's gone up, but at the end of the day, like you said, it's almost in line with what you can get. And I think people are more freaking out about the fact that they've lost a very good deal, rather than actually being shortchanged.
Yeah, I get that. And I think on Finance YouTube, everyone who's freaking out about it then drops their referral link for said free platform. We are not dropping our referral link because we never recommend anything that we wouldn't use ourselves. And I made an entire video just roasting the free platforms because I just think they incentivize bad behavior and I'm not interested in them. But I know that even amongst ourselves, we don't agree on that. So, wow, this is getting controversial right at the end. Anyone has got anything else? Otherwise, we have been going for nearly an hour here. We need to wrap this up. Matthew,
I've got one more thing. It's not necessarily positive, but for those of you who've listened to our New Year's podcast, for instance, knows that I'm a big fan of the LISA, lifetime ISA, and some bit of news that emerged, I think towards the middle of January, was the government's actually conducting a review at the minute to see if they're still suitable. So they were introduced in 2017. And for those of you who don't know the specifics, you can contribute a maximum of $4,000 a year into them. And the government will then top that up by 25%, so to $5,000 a year total contributions. Primary uses are just for your first property if you're a first-time buyer, or your retirement, accessible from the age of 60, or if you're sadly terminally ill. But they put a review out because they're wondering if it's still fit for purpose. Property prices and the cost of living is ever on the increase. And to be honest, my personal feeling is 4,000 is a massive, what's the word, hold back? I don't know what the word is in the
it's fiscal drag again, isn't it? It hasn't changed since ages.
Exactly, and it's I think it's holding a lot of savers back, and it's quite popular. I know the chart you showed earlier. They're not as popular as the cash ISA, but it's still about 1.5 million people who regularly use their lifetime ISA, and I hope they don't scrap them because that would be probably the last thing for first time buyers that they've just cut out. But maybe they need to rethink about how that's going to change. So if for me, I'd say increase the amount that you can save a year. Not necessarily don't know more money for the government, but at least save more than 4,000 a year. And maybe think about in London, because the Help to Buy ISA used to have a London uplift. So it's 250 everywhere in the country and then 450 for London. Whereas the Lifetime ISA, everywhere in the country is 450. Whereas, oh, hey, Sarah.
Adding to your point as well, it's the value of the homes, the limit. It just doesn't reflect house prices. So lots of people are saving in their lifetime ISAs, and then when it comes to them actually buying their house, they can't, because there's a limit on the value of the house that you can buy.
Exactly.
And it's just not kept up with house price rises.
Yeah, so it's a real shame. So I'm hoping that review will find that thing is not quite as fit for purpose as it once was in 2017. We've had a pandemic since then. There's a mortgage bubble on right now, housing bubble, sorry, that may or might not burst at some point. But yeah, I just think it'll be interesting to watch that space and see what they're going to change, if anything. If they scrap it, I'll be very displeased, and you'll be the first to hear about it.
We're spanning the generational differences here, and I'm going to come at it from a slightly different perspective. I think it would, if I was just thinking about this from a political point of view, I think this is absolute madness, because lifetime ISA, great or good option, not advice, for those looking to buy their first house. And as Matthew said, the way it works is that the government tops it up by 25%. So if you're a basic rate taxpayer and you put money in your pension, you get a 20% top up on that. But if you put in your lifetime ISA, you get a 25% top up on that. So what I'm saying is that actually these are more advantageous for lower rate taxpayers and people looking to buy their first house. Higher rate taxpayers, I think you just need to be careful what your goal is, right? Because if your goal, Andy's twitching here, he's going to say something, I know, but if your goal is to save for retirement, right, and you're a higher or additional rate taxpayer, if you put some money in your pension, you get tax relief at either 40 or 45%. So a pension could be a better option than a LISA in that situation, ignoring annual allowance issues, etc., like that. So my point is that actually, I think LISAs are better for lower rate taxpayers and first-time buyers than they are for higher and additional rate taxpayers. But Andy, I can sense you're going to say something.
No, so I was only just going to pick up on your point about this 20% versus 25%. It's all numbers. So essentially, if you put £800 into a LISA, the government will top it up by 25% of that £800 to £1,000. Is that right, Matthew? But actually, that's the same with a pension. If you put £800, it goes into pension net of basic rate tax. So it actually equates to £1,000 in your pension, which is 25%. It's just where you start with your numbers. So I'm just being the accountant and you're being the doctor in terms of just correcting you on that one.
It is your job to school me on the numbers, but the logic that for higher and additional rate tax,
higher rate tax, but absolutely, you were right on that. So I'll agree with you on that one.
No, that is your role, to keep the uneducated like me. And Sané's got no financial qualifications. We are heavily outnumbered here, Sané, because all of these lot are like closet geniuses and we're just, pretenders. But hey, that's a really good point, Andy. Okay, right. This is the new MDT style episode where we just like shoot the breeze about current topical things. If you're watching on YouTube, let us know your feedback in the comments. This is either going to be a one-time episode if the feedback is poor, but if the feedback is good, we can just keep doing this forever, because the MedicsMoney group chat is quite spicy. There's a lot of boomer references in it, as you may have realized by the jingle that I made especially. It's quite loud, that, isn't it? But thanks for listening.
Anti-boomer anymore, and I'm not a boomer anyway. So
it's in the news. We're not allowed.
You're not allowed. No, it's in the news.
It's in the news.
Oh yeah. We didn't even do that story.
Yeah. Oh, trust me, that's going to be our whole episode next time.
Oh, I look forward to it. Okay, great. Let's wrap it up. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked it, give us some feedback. Leave us some kind of a rating and review. And if the ratings and reviews are good, we'll just keep doing it. And thank you so much for everyone assembling. Almost the entire team here. No, Ed. But yeah, thanks so much. See you on the next one.